In the wake of the shooting of the peaceful NSAS protesters on the Lekki toll gate on the 20th of October 2020, there was a descent into a state of anarchy as government institutions and private businesses bore the brunt of people's anger. But in the wake of this development came a parochially driven narrative via social media through the attempt to give violence and ethnic coloration. In the northern part of the country, the protests are being called an indirect attempt to remove President Muhammadu Buhari from power by the southern interest, while here in Lagos, there have been insinuations that mayhem was perpetrated by elements from the eastern part of the country. The dominant conclusion from this social media engagement was that the NSAS movement was a positive pan-Nigerian engagement by the youthful population that was beyond ethnic, regional, and geopolitically motivations. So joining us now to take a look at all of this is civil society advocate Achike Chude. Welcome to the program, Achike. Achike, why was there even a narrative being peddled around about tribe in all of this and people giving ultimatums for the Igbos to leave Lagos and some other, unbelievable narratives that has caused people excruciating pain in the wake of all of this?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me, Rufai?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, well, you will always have a sociopathic deviance in society. You always have the dregs of the society. And unfortunately, I need to use that expression because the matters are so important, so weighty, that they should not be treated with kids' glove. Anything, I think it was the late intrepid journalist Delegiwa that said that any life lost in an act of violence is like 1 million lives lost in a pogrom. So you can imagine, the motivation for people who want to set people against one another, especially in a country like Nigeria with about 200 billion people in terms of population numbers. And so even on Facebook, we had this kind of narrative. And fortunately, I knew one of the people who posted something as bad and as terrible, that was aimed at inciting, inter-ethnic clashes. And I called him, I said, look, you should remember that in the wake that whatever happens on social media stays there forever, So, and that you should remember that in the wake of the Rwandan genocide, that after, the whole crisis had ended, they began to look for people who had inflamed it, people who had made dangerous rhetorics, people who had pitted, Rwandans against one another. And a lot of them were punished for it by the international courts that were set up put in place. So whatever you do, there's a footprint there on social media that remains there forever. You can't afford to make this kind of statement. So it is unfortunate. While there are good guys out there, there are also bad people. It's a fact of life, But the reality is that as this narrative was going on, there were people who had followed the whole NSAS process from the very beginning. They knew how it developed. They knew how the protesters were commended. They knew how orderly and they were, and they knew how responsible they were in cleaning up their the debts that they had left in the wake of their protests and the rest. They were being commended locally and internationally, and that was the image that lingered more in the minds of people. So by the time people began to try to change this narrative for whatever purposes, of course, obviously mischief was the intent. And whether there were other underlying factors such as the politics of this country that is at play, we don't know. But the reality is that it has always been the forte of the ruling class in this country to keep people divided, so that the unity, the questions that come from that unity, the questions that people must ask when they come together, why are we in this situation? Why is our economy so depressed? Why do we have a country that is so blessed in terms of material and human resources, and yet we are wallowing in poverty? It is divisions like this along strictly parochial lines, along myopic lines, divisions on the basis of religion, ethnicity, or geopolitical, leanings that keep people, that prevent people from coming together to begin to ask the questions that will unite rather than divide. And this has been the forte of the political class in this country. And so, unfortunately, when such things start, perhaps it flows from there. But whether it flows from there or not, the good thing is that there are people from across all lines, all ethnic affiliations and colorations that stood up to be counted on social media to counter this very dangerous and terrible narrative that some deviants were trying to, strike.
Well, would you recommend to government that those persons who were ethnicizing the protests and trying to use social media to cause tension and chaos in Nigeria deserve to be sanctioned, if it is possible to do so, even despite the fact that some of them are abroad? That's one. Two, do you find a justification here? Do you find a justification here for social media regulation?
No, and yes. Yes to the first question, because you said if it is possible. Now, why? I mean, the problem with social media is that sometimes it's difficult to be able to, separate the wheat from the chaff. It is difficult to get to the root of maybe a particular story that is trending on social media to also determine the origin of this story, once they break and people begin to fly with it. But in those cases or instances where they are identifiable people, such as the posts that we saw with people showing their faces and so on, you find out that even if they are abroad, they are not beyond the reach of the law. Because in some of the countries in Europe, most especially Europe, they have robust policies with regards to incitement, on social media. And they do not have social media bills that regulate the way we have tried to regulate in this country. The reality is that, it's easy to talk about. There are those who are also sympathetic to the fact that you cannot allow just anybody to come up on social media to make a statement. But it is the sanction that you impose on these people that determines whether others who are following that same path, will take caution and change their ways, without having to come up with the social media bill. Because, who is going to practicalize the social media bill? Government itself that has not been able to escape the opprobrium of the people when it comes to the issues of human rights, the rule of law, obedience to court orders, and the rest. So there is that fear. Again, the same government that intervened, in a very terrible manner at the Lekki toll gate. So you don't want to give that kind of government this kind of powers. But regardless of that, we must be able to also look for ways to sanction those people that are visible, those people that are not hiding their faces or hiding their signatures whenever such inflammatory statements are put out there on social media. They can be got to. The government can reach out to the young man, for instance, who made that a statement asking people to flee to leave one part of the country and back to their base. But then, can you ask the government to do that, to get this person from abroad? When here in Nigeria, we have had people asking people, even within this country, people that are also known, who have made statements in the media, telling people from certain sections of this country to leave their own part of Nigeria. So if the government has not been able to root out the evil in the land, are they going to be able to do that successfully when it comes to, countries beyond the territories of Nigeria? So these are the issues. So it's the contradiction. We can reach the people here much easily. We have not done that when they have made such inflammatory statements. Is it those ones that are living abroad that you can that you need the government to deal with? So it's the double standards that we talk about. When you talk about the activities of government, especially in the past few years.
Thank you. Now, incitement often relies on hysteria and propaganda, but let's look at some concrete facts, such as the popularity of SARS in the northern parts of the country, which had pro-SARS groups being very vocal. You'll recall that even recently, a SARS commander in Borno, the real epicenter of the war against insurgency, was given an award by the Borno State House of Assembly. Why did the northern part of the country have such a completely different experience with SARS than the southern parts of the country? Was there a different standard operating procedure up north?
Well, they say different strokes for different people. And then,
Well, but I thought, he was making a strong point there about people who exploit any gap, any fault line, any crisis at all, to try to inflict mayhem on the people. And oftentimes, as we have seen, the people who bear the brunt are usually innocent persons.
Yes.
Look at Mr. Oke Adibe, the owner of Clear's place. you could see,
It's
his
heartbreaking.
mood. A man who had been doing business for more than 28 years, who had lived in Lagos for more than 35 years, who in fact says he considers himself a Yoruba man.
Yeah.
And then he became the target of that level of destruction.
It's disgraceful.
I mean, I feel for him.
So do
I
I.
really feel for him. And there are many persons like that who have suffered so much from this crisis. Well, Achike Chude, it's good to have you back.
Yes, so we're talking about the differences between the perception of SARS here in the South and North. The reality is that, we have two realities if we're going to look at it from that perspective. If the South has been at the, Southern youths have been at the receiving end of the SARS menace, that is a reality, that is a truth. If up north they say they do not have a problem with SARS, then perhaps that is their own reality. And so what it means is that, but the reality again is that you must address the issue of the activities of SARS in the South, because that is our southern reality. While if the North wants to leave it that way, they are not being harassed and all that, by the SARS and being brutalized by them, then it's okay. But then it means that we must have, different kind of policy with regards to the operations of, the SARS or whichever group or body is going to replace the SARS down here, in the South. So I think that is the way, I have to look at it. But we must also realize that SARS represents insecurity, apart from the human rights violations and all that. And the North is at the receiving end, is at the brunt of insecurity. It is in the North that you have the activities of Boko Haram, the herdsmen, bandits, and all that. So, and maybe it is from that perspective that we are looking at that. Because the problem is so dire in the North, that any security outfit that is in place, no matter how bad they are, that they are willing to overlook their indiscretions, in order to face the bigger, problems of insecurity in the North. That is the only way I can look at it in terms of the North and South divide with regards to this SARS and SARS situation. But of course, we also know that there was also this issue of people trying to say that it was the whole SARS thing is a Southern, attempt at trying to unseat the Northern president. It's bunkum, it's absolute rubbish. And this kind of thinking at this particular point in time in the 21st century do not have and should not have any bearing on the Nigerian Federation. We must reiterate the fact that the movement by the youth was a pan-Nigerian movement. It was unprecedented. It was a movement that was reminiscent of what some of us did at 18, 19, 20 when we were in universities. And so for a very long time, we have often accused the Nigerian youth of inability to connect their presence with their past and their future, and that we've always accused them, of not being focused enough on the real things that matter. And, all of a sudden, they woke up one day and then they were everywhere in a pan-Nigerian manner. And nobody in all of those crowds that gathered were interested in where a particular person, a young person came from or what his religion, was. We had instances where on a Friday, the Christian youth gave space for their Muslim brothers to pray. And the same thing, when Christian prayers had to be made, the same thing was respected. And so that is the kind of vision we want of the Nigerian youth. That is the kind of disposition that we need from the Nigerian youth. Any other narrative that is being peddled by, errant members of the youthful population in this country should be discarded, and those people completely isolated. Has no place in the new Nigeria that all of us are looking forward to having.
All right. I think it was Pierre Trudeau that always emphasized the need for reason over emotions of any sort. And how can we bring about reason more in our national discourse rather than the rapid sentiment and high emotions of division that some people are peddling? Because this went further. Even in the looting and the destruction, there was a narrative going around at a point saying that, the banks damaged are from people from a certain ethnic group own those banks, that people from another certain ethnic group, that the Igbo bank were not damaged. But alas, I saw Fidelity Bank, for instance, that was really damaged beyond repairs in Ajah area of Lagos. So how do we bring reason back to our national space in our conversation, that we can truly disagree, we can have different ideas, but reason says that we must all support our country?
Yeah, it's education. And education is not about the four walls of the university. You can be educated outside of the university environment. but it's not just any kind of education. I'm talking about the education that liberates the mind. That is the kind of education that we need. The education that does not, the education that does not look at a person's creed or affiliation or religious indoctrination or whatever, but at the content of a man's, character or heart. That is what Martin Luther, that famous statement, that he made. And I think that needs to begin now that we have had, an unfortunate circumstance. It provides us, even though there have been advantages and disadvantages, but there are also advantages. The advantages that it provides us with the opportunity to begin to re-educate the minds of the average Nigerian youth. But most importantly, also, it gives us an idea how dangerous and how fluid the Nigerian situation is with regards to the jobless, the millions of people that are littering the streets. We are all in danger. For as long as you have this level of unemployment, this level of hunger, this level of anger and frustration in the minds of the Nigerian youth with so much energy, passion to burn, then you realize that all of us are endangered. And most importantly, because you see, like I was telling some people about what has happened, is that when a lion, attacks a human being, tests blood for the first time, that lion must be put down because it will become a manhunter. Now, our youths have tested some level of power. There have been those ones who were wonderful, who did things the proper way, and who acted with maturity and solidarity and responsibility. But you also have the other aspects of the youth that have been, bred by a system that has been unjust and equal for a very long period of time. Youth that have also been, bred by politicians, people who are supposed to be in government. So we need to begin to win these people off the politicians. And in a way, perhaps they have an idea. Because if you remember this, if you look at the spate of destruction that have gone on in this country, from state to state, houses of senators serving and past being attacked and all that, no justification for that at the same time. But you realize that some of the people who did this are people who have been aligned to politicians in the first place. So we have to keep on warning that you can keep on massing them, you can keep on feeding them, you can keep on giving them money. It is only for a period of time. When it comes to the crunch, these are the same people that are going to turn against you. And I'm talking about the politicians. So we need to begin to move them away from their very dangerous stranglehold, and look for ways to meaningfully engage them, at least for the survival of every other person in society.
Well, Achike, just a minute to go. By way of summary, what are those key lessons you think government should take away from what has happened so far?
Key lessons. First, I'm even worried that they are not even beginning to learn the lessons. And that is the fact that the youths in their numbers have come to stay. You cannot get rid of them. You must get rid of the elements in the country's politics that bring frustration to them and makes them angry, because they have shown capacity for good at a popular level, at a mass level, and they have also shown capacity for destruction. So you would expect that even our politicians, immediately this thing has happened, because people are questioning the very serious, humongous amounts of money that they are earning today, as members of National Assembly and even executives. They need to begin to talk about it, and they are not talking about it, meaning that they are not already beginning to learn the lessons that they need to learn. Then our security agencies, you cannot continue to have this kind of, give them the kind of remunerations that you give them, and you expect that all of us are going to be safe. They are going to turn the guns against us ultimately at the end of it.
Well,
even the fact that
we've got to go.
Okay,
well, thank you very much, Achike Chude, for joining us on the morning show.